Join me as I take on a challenge of saying goodbye to hip pain with just a few simple exercises. Don't forget to comment below and share your own experiences with hip pain, what exercises have worked for you, and what challenges you have faced. Hip pain is a common complaint that affects millions of people around the world, making everyday activities like walking, sitting, and even sleeping a real struggle. But the good news is that relief is possible, and it's not as complicated as you might think. But just a few simple exercises, you can start to say goodbye to hip pain and hello to a more active and comfortable life. So, what causes hip pain in the first place? Well, one of the main culprits is a sedentary lifestyle. When we spend too much time in a seated position, being inactive, our hip joints become stiff and inflexible, leading to pain and discomfort. When we take the joints in a repeated bending activities, this creates capsule tightness in the other directions. Once that starts happening, then you get a lot of muscle protection that happens. The first phase of treatment is always checking the mobility of the hip joint and the back joint. So that's what we're going to show you first. So why do we check the mobility first? Because we want to use these as baselines. Because again, if we have issues within the joints, like we're always sitting, we're always walking, we're always keeping this joint in this flex position, then you will have other motions that start locking up. Even the flexion motion can start locking you up. So we want to take baselines so that when we go into doing some of these exercises, we can kind of recheck the baselines to see if we have improvement. Now, if the mobility is 100% normal, it's equal on both sides, then we know if there's tightness, the tightness isn't necessarily coming from protection. The tightness is probably coming from tissue shortening or using muscles in a way that you shouldn't be using them because there's a strength issue that needs to happen. And so it gives us a lot of information. So the first thing we're going to show you are mobility checks that we can do and start using those as our baselines. We always want to rule out the back because the back is a component that refers down into the hip. If we miss that piece, then we will be missing a piece of the puzzle and you aren't really getting to the source of the problem. We're not going to really be going in and talking about back stuff today. We're really going to focus in on the hip, but we still want to show you what some of those motions look like. So you always just want to see how far can you go down when you bend down and go forward. When you go backwards, how far can we go backwards? We should notice a pretty similar motion. Like if you don't go down because of tightness going forward, we should have a similar tightness going backward. If you're pretty flexible going forward, you should be pretty flexible going backwards. So those are just like baselines to kind of look. You can have hip tightness where the hip's not moving that also is creating issues in the back that's not allowing us to fully move through that motion. Very common as well. So that's why we always just kind of want to take baselines. The next one will be moving our hips side to side. Now again, you can have tightness in one side and you notice that you don't move as well to the other side. That also can be coming from the back as well as the hip. Again, it's just baselines for us to get more information. Other motions, now we're going to go to the hip. You can lie on your back and again, move one hip where you're really moving it as far as it can go. And then do the same thing with the other side. And you should notice that they're pretty equal. You may have more tightness on one side, but the motion should be pretty equal. If you notice that like, wow, it just doesn't go, like it feels hard, it doesn't go, and the other side's like this is bouncy, well, we know that there's an issue within that hip. Same thing, you can do figure 4, and you can really just kind of push out on it just to see if you notice differences. Again, it should be one side should be bouncy, the other side will be like, oh, this just doesn't go. So you're just looking to see if there's some differences from side to side. Same kind of thing, internal rotation. You can take the leg and pull it down and in. I'll show you on the other side. So you take the knee 90 degrees, go down and internally rotate. And again, you're just looking for, does it feel kind of the same? You may have, again, more tightness on one side, the other side, but you're looking at like, oh, wow, this one doesn't move and this one goes all the way down. You're going to notice some pretty big differences. So those are the hip stuff. The last one that you'll do for hip will be looking at hip extension as well. So you'll just come up into a kneeling position, and you want to go as far forward as possible. And then again, you're going to compare that with the other side, going as far forward as possible. And again, you're just looking for, are there differences side to side? And if you notice that, whoa, this side moves and the other side doesn't move, then we need to start addressing those mobility issues. Now, before we get into some of the exercises, if everything looks normal and you're still kind of getting some tightness, this is when we'll start looking into soft tissue shortening that we can work on. And a lot of times that can happen because of weakness that happens in the hip. So if you have something that's weak, you're going to be compensating using something in the hip that you probably shouldn't be using, where you need to get some other muscles to activate. And that can create some tightness, and you could just have some just general shortening. So we're going to show you how to release the hip as well as one of the exercises. And then we're going to get into strengthening, because strengthening is a huge component. When you can start working on getting your hips stronger, hips are part of the core. This is going to help you in everything in life, because it starts from our hips and works out. Like if we have weakness in through our pelvis area, then it makes everything else that goes away from it work a lot harder and give us a lot of compensation. So here are the 5 exercises that we're going to get into. So the first 2 are going to be mobility. Then we're going to show you a soft tissue release, and then we're going to get into 2 strengthening exercises. So all of them are going to be on the table. One of them is going to be on the ground. So let's go with the first one. So let's say like I noticed that my right hip was not moving as well as my left hip. And this is the hip that I kind of get tightness in. You can lie on your bed, one leg up and one leg down. And again, put the leg out a little bit farther from the table. It's just going to help you with a little bit of balance to make sure that you can roll and keep this hip down. So you can start out this way. I have a lot of mobility, so but some people, they may just get a really good stretch just doing this motion. Then you can kind of come up onto your hands and just make the elbows straight. And again, you're just making sure that you keep that hip down, and you can walk the arms up. Now, again, I have a lot of range of motion, a lot of mobility. You're probably not going to look like this, but you can kind of gauge what you can do, and you want to just hang out there to really stretch the joint. That's what we're trying to do, is stretching the joint. So this is one direction that you can go into, and then when you do it, hanging out there for a good minute or so, then you can go back and retest your motion and see, oh wow, actually this is better and this is not better. Now, with that understanding, if you're stretching the joint to end range and then you move it in the opposite direction, you might notice like, oh wow, I'm really stiff. It's not any different where if you hang your leg up off here and there's nothing underneath the knee and this knee's been hanging out here for a while, even though you have no issues with your knee, if you reverse it because you've been at end range extension, you're going to have a lot of stiffness initially coming out of it, but then it'll go away really quickly. So if you notice that when you go in and you do a little bit of hip flexion, do it one more time and you'll notice that that can go away. So again, if you notice that your baselines are improving, then this is a great stretch that you just start off with to start getting where the hip starts moving a little bit better. And that will help with some of that tissue tightness that is giving you some protection. Now, sometimes we need to add a little bit of rotation, because what do we sit? When we sit, our legs are kind of out like this. And so if we notice that, God, extension sort of helps, but I need a little bit of extra help, sometimes we need to add a little bit of rotation on the table. Now, I'm going to show you this one with this leg. And what you're going to do is you're going to have the one leg off the edge of the table. You're going to bring the other leg back. You can, again, start like this where the leg is straight. But if you go in and add the knee to be just a little bit bent, and you just kind of work through that and kind of rotate, you're going to find spots that are going to be a little bit tight. And then you just kind of hang out in those spots and just kind of breathe. Again, holding it for a good minute, and what we're doing is we're trying to stretch that joint. So where you feel like, ooh, that's the spot, you're going to kind of hang out there. Everyone's going to be a little bit different on where they feel it, because everyone's hip is a little bit different. The hip is super mobile, so you want to make sure that you're just kind of working through the motion and feeling like, oh, that's the spot, and then we'll go and hang out there. Again, after that exercise, go in and retest your mobility. If your mobility is completely normal, then you're going to go to this next phase of treatment, and we're going to working on getting some of the soft tissue tightness away to get it to kind of release, using a tennis ball for trigger point release. Now, the biggest areas that people have issues with in their hip is usually more on the outside. So you'll find almost like a little divot in between here. So here's where my hip bone is, and here's where my sit bones are. In through here gets really tight. All the way up and through here on the side gets really tight, up and through here. So how you're going to hit that is you're going to almost be, to hit lower, you're going to be almost sitting up. So if you sit up and you just kind of roll to the side, you're kind of in that divot. You can use your hands and legs to kind of hold up, so that you aren't going down as hard on it, especially if it's really tight. But if you feel like you can, then you can just relax into that motion. And then you'll literally roll the ball up and around, and you'll find like, oh, yep, there's a spot. I'm going to hang out here for a little bit just to kind of get it to release. Breathe through it so that you can release some of these areas. Again, use your hands and legs if you need a little bit more help. You can also do this on the wall, and that'll take some of the pressure off of it as well. The hip muscles that we are targeting are really deep, so usually you have to get some pressure in order to get in through there. But when you find the spots, you're going to know, because you're like, oh, that's really tight, so that you can kind of release some of those spots. So that's how you will use the tennis ball to release some of the tightness that you have. Now we want to get into a little bit of strengthening, because a lot of the reasons, if your hip hasn't been able to move, you have tightness in through there, you're going to have definitely a lot of weakness. And so a big part of the weakness, the reason why we get a lot of tightness through the outside here, is because the muscles in the straight in the back, the hip extensor muscles, do not work very well. And so what we tend to do is shift our weight to the outside to get some stability through there, or we'll get a little bit more rotation because we don't have as much hip extension, and that works on a lot of the muscles out through here, which gets tight. Those are all common compensation patterns that we notice. So the first strengthening exercise that we're going to do is you're going to use a wall. So you'll come up and your leg is going to be up on the wall. So we want to do one leg. So I'm going to use my right leg. And what you're going to do in order to get the hip extensors and the hamstrings all involved in that pelvis is you're going to do a slight tuck. This just makes us use the backside of your hip muscles more. If you kind of arch, you're going to contract through that quad a little bit more. So just a small tilt. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your heel against the wall, and it's like we're dragging it down in the wall, but we don't actually really do it. So you'll do a tuck, push into the wall and down, and you're going to just lift up and kind of hold that position so that you really can feel the hamstring, the glutes, everything that we want to fire, not the muscles on the outside. So you'll do that, hold it for about 5 seconds, reset, tilt, push straight and down, straight into the wall and then down to the wall, and then lift up. And just kind of hold it for 3 to 5 seconds so you really can feel those muscles firing in that area. So that's one of the exercises. Okay, the last exercise that I'm going to show you is we're going to work on strengthening again those hip extensor muscles that just don't fire very well, but we're going to do it in a standing position. And we're going to use again the wall to kind of assist us. So what you're going to want to do, I'm going to show you on this side first. You're going to put one leg back and the other leg that's standing. So the leg that's standing is actually one that's going to work. And you're just going to hip hinge. So you hip hinge to where you touch the wall, and then you push through the heel, squeeze the glute as you come straight up. So I'll show you on the other side. Again, leg up to kind of support us. Then you shift your hips all the way to the back, and then you squeeze the glutes to kind of come up. You'll feel this in that hamstring hip area. Squeeze, push through the heel and the front toe to kind of squeeze up and come in. Going back. So you're going to do this 10 times, 2 sets to really, again, work on getting those glutes to start firing better so that we can take some of the pressure off the outside of the hip. So give these exercises a try and comment in the section on what's working and what's not working. Make sure you subscribe to our channel if you like what we're doing. This video, share this video with anyone that you know needs to hear this message, and we will see you next time.